day, my G's. I hope you're all having a whimsical Thursday. That was a little introduction there from your tutorial host today, Artifact, playing his shakuhachi, the Japanese flute, which is played a little differently from other flutes. It's a little bit difficult to play, and you make the sound a little bit like when you're blowing air over an empty beer bottle, and it's very hard to get a good note. And but when you do strike that note, whoa, it's just a wonderful feeling, and the actual velocity of your breath can actually change the note by a whole octave in itself without you even changing any of the fingering. That's right, fingering. You can actually, I think, play 3 different octaves depending on, you know, a low breath will play the low octave, and then a more medium breath will play the middle octave, and a really high breath you can play an octave up. It's quite piercing though, that high one. Anyway, today we're doing something completely unrelated to that. I just thought I'd get the shakuhachi out because just got to, show the shakuhachi some love. And I thought I'd put on some Moroccan silk for you guys today as well. So that's very interesting, isn't it? Anyway, what we're going to do today is we're going to process some live drumming. So I've gone ahead with a friend from Berlin, Jan Sticks on Speed, who's a little bit famous in the drum and bass circuit. We have gone and recorded a bunch of samples in the hopes of making a great track together. But what I thought I'd do for a little tutorial today would be simply to run you guys through some processing techniques for turning a sort of mediocre live drumming recording, just sort of with an overhead mic, into a drum beat which is much more usable in a modern and constructive drum and bass way. So yes, we sort of recorded the drum kit with these one or two little overhead mics. I think the whole thing is in mono anyway, and then we've basically sort of not really even recorded the bottom part of the kick, or I don't think it was mic'd up very well, so you can barely even hear the kick. But the whole concept was going to be that we would replace the kick anyway, so we're just really trying to capture the room sound and the hats and the snare, and a little bit of that kick high end as well. So anyway, let's dive in. So why don't I give you guys a little before and after of the processing. Okay, so here is the original sample that we're going to work with just for this little demonstration. And here's how it will sound after the processing techniques. So very, very nice and juicy there. So what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to create a drum group, okay? And then we're going to use the original sample first. So this is the main one, of course. Then we're going to create a separate version of it, which is going to add a stereo image because it was in mono to begin with. Then we're going to beef up the kick by adding a new kick sample. And then we're going to add in a clap to fit on top of the snare as well. And the first thing that I've done in the drum sample is I've gone ahead and just make sure it's all nicely matched up to the grid. So I haven't gone to the extent of making sure every little hi-hat syncs up, but those main sounds like the sort of kicks, the snares, maybe one or two of the odd hi-hats, I've just realigned to snap them to the grid by using the slicing mode on Logic, and you can do obviously this in most DAWs anyway, slicing the transients and snapping them to the grid. I think you guys can figure that out without my help. So yeah, that's basically the first thing that I've done, is to really make sure it's nice and tight, loop the beat, make sure it's all like synced up, and there's no like weird timing issues. So that's the first thing. Then once that's done, we can go ahead and start processing this main one first. So what I wanted to do was to get the volume right on it first. So because we recorded it a little bit low, I've had to go and turn it up here. So I've actually turned it up a little bit in the audio file to begin with, up 5 dB, because it really was recorded quite low. And then, but the quality is fine though. And then I'm boosting it up here with another utility gain. Okay, we'll put on the clipper first, because as we know, we don't want anything to hit above 0. So I've got my little clipper and then a little gain at minus 0.01. So it's definitely going to be in the green and not in the orange. And so next then, as you can hear, the kick, we don't really have that recording of the low end of the kick in the file. You know, it's kind of missing that. But we've got a nice got a nice representation of the fundamental elements of the snare and the hi-hats, and that's really what we were concerned with anyway. Okay, so the next thing I've done is I've taken out some of the low end, especially sort of where the kick would be, you know, because we don't really need that because I'm going to put in a new kick underneath. But I'm going to leave enough low end in so that you get the fundamental of the snare, which you can see here, which is about 250, which is a lovely frequency for a drum and bass snare anyway. And we're not going to beef up the low end of the snare. We're going to use this recorded snare as the main fundamental part to our snare. Just because it sort of fits so well with all the hats and everything, I don't want to go ahead and disturb that, okay? So taking out a bunch of low end here, and then I'm going to really crank up the kind of saturation of the whole beat now with some decapitator distortion on the E mode. I like the E mode with a bit of brightness. I find this mode, you know, they're just different colors essentially, like colors of the rainbow, but this rainbow color seems to have the most high-end grit for me. So 2.8 on the drive, 100% wet. And if this had a kick in the low end, I would be a bit more hesitant to use it because I don't want to distort the kick drum. But with the snare, it's a bit higher up in the spectrum, so full speed ahead with the saturation, please. And then next we shall go on to the Kilohertz Transient Shaper. And here, I'm not going to affect the real actual transient. I'm just going to tighten up the loop a bit by taking the sustain down. We have got a lot of room sound on the recording, and this is just going to help like lower the volume of that a little bit, you know. We're going to leave it on mostly the room sound, but just giving it a bit more of a dynamic shape there. And again, I've done one other extra little low cut because I like to do low cuts often and more and smoother rather than really sharp cuts. So that's why I've just done one more low cut to take out that extra rumble down here. Wonderful business. Anyway, next we're going to move on to the Leia, which is going to sit on top. Princess Leia. She's my favourite character in Star Wars. No, she's not. It's Han Solo. Han Solo is the Don. So here we've got copied down the exact same channel, but the idea here is to make a stereo version because, as you will notice, the first one is pretty much just a mono ting, yeah, technical term ting. So the second layer here, we're gonna stereoize it, but we're gonna do this in my favorite way, which is to firstly distort the sound to change the harmonics, then run it through some convolution reverb to put it into a new space, a really tight convolution reverb, and then EQ out the low end and play with the transient again. So first up, we're going to distort it, and I'm going to distort it differently than with the Sound Toys one from the one before, so we've got a bit of separation. And here I'm going to use the fold-back drive from the Kilohertz, classic Kilohertz distortion standalone plugin. And here you can actually introduce a bit of spread as well, which is lovely. Okay, sounding a bit weird still because of that low end. We haven't EQ'd it out yet, but I like to sort of distort and convolute first before I do the EQing, because after you're going to have to do the EQing at the end anyway, because the distortion and the convolver will usually add in some kind of low end artifacts, frequencies. Hello, artifact, that's me. So here I'm convoluting the whole thing. And with that distortion on before, like, it really helps to bring up the volume as well. And so not only does it change the harmonics, but it also gave us more volume where we need it. And so I'm doing 100% mix on the convolution because I'm really just doing a purely convoluted layer here. And I'm using the white blur 50 millisecond preset on the synthetic folder because that is a beautiful tight preset. Taking the feedback down a bit so it's a little bit shorter. And then we'll carry on to the next parts, which are quite simply EQing out some low end, done a low cut, and then also a little bump here, a little low bell. And then one more time, please, for everyone at the back, a little bit more low cutting to take out the rumbly nonsense. Okay, so I'm feeling very whimsical today. That's the best word I've found to describe my personality today. Sustain, minus 26, one more time to shorten that loop a little bit. Give it a little bit of a tighter tail after all of those hats. And that's, again, because the convolution, you know, it's giving a lot of reverb, essentially. So the sustain is going to help us tighten it even further. And obviously we've got to blend this together with our beat so we can go ahead and play them both together, because out of context it's all useless, isn't it? So we can start to blend that back in, and I can use I can use the volume here to try and get a nice balance. So it's a nice little extra stereo layer that I'm happy with, and we can move on now. As you see on the drum group, things are clipping heavily, so I'm going to quickly turn on my clipper here on the drum group because it's all running into that, and my little minus 0.01 little OCD thing as well. So next, let's go ahead and add in a kick, and this is just a one-shot kick from a sample pack, and it's a nice beefy one. I've not like been religious about trying to find the right pitch. I've just tried a couple of kicks, and this one sort of worked. I don't get very religious about drum pitch, to be fair, because it's a rhythmical instrument. It does have a pitch to it, obviously, but you can kind of do it by ear usually, and then, you know, just go with what kind of the pitch of the drums naturally is, and then design the rest of your melody and your bass and lead around that. That's how I approach it, really. I don't like to pitch drums around too much. That's just, it might be from laziness though as well. Anyway, regardless, it sounds pretty good with this kick. And all we're going to do is process this kick slightly to get it to fit into the groove a little bit further. And here I'm doing a transient shaper, taking the sustain down -12. Taking that, just the tail of the kick down a little bit. It's like a little bit shorter. Boosting the volume a little bit, and that's all I've done to it there. It's pretty nice where it is already. It will tie in together with the loop a little bit more when we go to process the whole group. We'll do that in just a moment. But one more thing I wanted to add in was a bit of brightness on top of the snare. And this is a nice, juicy, loud clap. Really long clap with a lot of like little mini transients inside it. It's very sort of flammy. Okay, and that's just gonna give it a bit of a nice character, but I'm gonna heavily mix this one down into the background. So we'll start with taking down a bit of the transient and really shortening the sustain so it's really nice and tight. Let's solo it while we're listening here. So making it a bit tighter, adding a little bit of convolution reverb, just a bit of a tail. It's really tiny there though, softening it up a little bit, taking out some low end up to about 400 here. Okay, and just one stage at a time. Again, I'm going to take out some more of the transient and really, really shorten it a lot more here. Getting a bit tighter. And then, again, a couple more times, taking out a bit of low end a bit higher up this time. Becoming much more of that high end layer that I want. And boosting the real highs a little bit. When I'm losing so much volume, I want to give it a bit more brightness at the top. And then, again, sustain down just a little bit more. So nice and tight with the snare then, with the main one. You definitely hear it in there, but it's been mixed down to be quite far in the background, okay? But it gives a nice bit of extra character, I think. All right, with our kick again. So there we have it. That's the layers done. And I'm pretty happy with those. And it's just for this kind of loop, you know, just to sort of give it a bit of a modern edge. And so the next thing I'm going to do is just process the whole group then. So firstly, we will turn it up a bit. Bear in mind, we've already got the clipper on, so we can test how far we can push it into the red before it starts to distort. But here I've got up almost 1 dB on the whole thing. That already does wonders to the whole sound, boosting it all in volume. No point bothering with any other plugins unless you can do your volume staging right, is there now? We got a lot of stereo in the low end, so we're going to have to take some of that out. Drums tend to be a bit more mono for me, so I might go up a bit higher than I would with the bass, and we can have more of a stereo bass later, but I'm going up to about 200 here, taking out the sides on a mid-side EQ. Of course, you guys know why we're doing that, because the stereo image in a speaker in real life in the low end can only reproduce a mono image, especially when you're sort of talking about 80 hertz and below. You know, it's really never any point in having that in any stereo. It doesn't really make much sense, you know. So mid-side EQ, all you got to do, take out the sides, and then you're good to go. All right, next thing, a little bit more brightness wanted from me in the high end. So I've got a little coloring plugin that I love, the SDRR compressor. I'm not really using it as a compressor. I'm just boosting the treble here. It's got a nice little treble boost, and then mixing the whole effect in here. sort of like adding a high shelf with an EQ essentially, but just using a plugin to give it a bit of extra colouring. Okay. Now I'm going to EQ the whole drum break a little bit, and I wouldn't always do this, but I think it just kind of worked in this case. So I'm just giving a bit more boost where I need it, because one thing that you'll know when you record, amateurly record a drum kit, is you won't like have the full spectrum sound, you know. So you're going to have to bring some gaps up so that you can get the maximum volume from the sample in the right spots. And doing this on the whole channel with the clap and the kick and everything in it is by nature, it's going to sort of blend them all together a little bit as well, you know. So here I'm boosting about 1.8k. It's mainly sort of the brightness that I'm after from this group. I need a bit more brightness on everything. And again here I'm doing another little boost, more of a flatter one, around 4k. Okay. Lovely stuff. Finally, again, a little bit of a mid-side EQ to take out the stereo one more time, but a bit smoother here. It's going up a bit higher, but it's a bit of a smoother cut. Yeah. A little bit of extra, you know, balancing the stereo image of the low end out a bit. And then finally, I've done a little mastering compressor on the whole drum mix, about 21% on the parallel mix. Okay, just with the Shadow Hills one, which is lovely. Yeah, and that's basically the whole drum group done then, my G's. Now, obviously, I was very fortunate to know someone who had a live drum kit that I could go ahead and record. But if you don't have a drummer or a drum kit yourself, what other things are there that you could record to make your own percussion? Just in your house or at your workplace, there are many, many things. You could create your own shakers. You can, make little cymbal sounds with like stuff in the kitchen or whatever. Have you guys ever tried doing something like that, recording your own percussion sounds? Leave a comment down below, or leave an idea of, you know, what a great and creative thing to record yourself at home could be. And as I sort of demonstrated here, you don't need to worry too much about getting the perfect recording, because with processing and clever layering, you can just use the recordings that you've made in a creative way to create something really unique, and that will sound very, very different and unique to you, you know. So this sample now, this drum loop, you know, has been made in a very, very creative way, and I will go on to continue to make a whole track with Jan sticks on speed, using a similar kind of techniques to this to process the drums for it. And we've got our own, you know, unique drum sound that we can, you know, take forward and create a cool song with, hopefully. But yes, my G's, leave a little comment down below what you thought about that, and if you've ever recorded any percussion sounds yourself, so would love to know. And in the future, when we do end up releasing this track, it'll most likely be on my new label, Artificial Music, which you guys probably have heard me harping on about now for ages. But if you haven't given us a quick little follow on SoundCloud and Instagram, be really appreciative if you could go ahead and do that now. I'll leave the links up there and down below to the Instagram and the SoundCloud of the label. And tomorrow we will continue a little bit more with drums. I'm going to show you some examples of how we can really jazz up a drum group using a few different techniques and special one-shot sounds, and just creative little drum like special character things that can really add that extra life and interest to a standard drum beat. So enhancing drum grooves coming up tomorrow. Make sure you like and subscribe and hit the bell as well, so you'll be updated for the rest of this month and the rest of this little tutorial series that I'm doing. Hope it was helpful for you guys today. Have a great rest of your day. Peace out. Much love.